What's up, everybody? Welcome to the CanesInSight Daily Podcast. Happy Friday, powered by Anajar and Levine Accident Attorneys. As always, my name is Danny Enriquez, D-Money. I'm here with Peter Ariz. We are live from Duffy's Tavern. Back in business. We are open for business here at Duffy's, the home of Miami football. Now taking credit cards. You know what it is. You look at the walls. You see the history. It is the spot for Hurricane fans, for sports fans. They were rolling yesterday with NFL games. You want to take your family. You want to watch games. You want to enjoy history with also some great food and an updated menu with all the classics. Duffy's. I know it's Pete's home away from home. It's our home away from home. And love doing shows here, man, especially on a beautiful Friday. This place is going to be bumping. How you feeling, Pete?
Feeling good, man. Phenomenal. Friday before Bethune here. Nice to get a Saturday action. Obviously, it was awesome to get that primetime Sunday night game last week, but you want to be there when everyone else is playing on a Saturday. So as a fan, being able to watch football, all day, and then should be obviously a relatively stress-free is what we're expecting. Like you always say, D, we can overlook opponents. We aren't playing, but yeah, I think just excited for a nice full Saturday of football, and then as we'll get into here, being able to see a lot of the young guys that didn't really get extended looks last week. A lot of them maybe getting some action on special teams, but seeing more of them from scrimmage, getting certain guys the ball that maybe, again, in a game like last week, it's a little bit tighter, even though the ball was spread out pretty good. But, yeah, should be a nice opportunity for some guys to earn some reps going into USF.
TJ Preble asking, where can I get that CanesInSight shirt? Just look down. You see that little shop down there. You click that, get to CanesInsight.myshopify.com. But you can see it right there under our videos. It should have all those items there. So just click in there. You can find, you got the old design, the new design. The CanesInsight's a little bigger on the new design. But all of those are available on the CanesInsight My Shopify shop, which you can see right under this video. Let's go ahead and click that. So yeah, Pete, a lot to talk about here.
D, it seems like you still have your voice lost from last week. Have you recovered? I'm a little concerned, man.
That was about like 7 podcasts ago, Canes Connection interview ago. We did storm sessions as well. So, but man, we're recovered. We're rolling. Got a nice club soda. Shout out to the staff here at Duffy's Tavern, our home away from home on Fridays. We got Lance Roffers in the building. Those who don't know, Hurricanes Vision on Twitter. If you read CanesInsight.com, 7.5 million posts and counting, you know exactly who I'm talking about. Famous for his breakdowns, play by play, technique by technique, leverage by leverage. I mean, the littlest details, he's putting those on and trying to educate Canes fans on what's going on in the game. Inside the game, Lance Roffers, love having him on. He is back by popular demand to break down the Notre Dame game, give some insights that are going to help us understand what's going on the rest of the season, right, from what happened in that game.
D, I'm going to just say before we bring him on, because we didn't talk about this before, I'm going to mute when he's talking, because if not, we'll get a feedback here. So I'm gonna mute him. So Lance will bring you on. Welcome in.
How's it going, guys? Appreciate you guys having me on.
Doing awesome, man. So Lance, wanted to ask you, first of all, you did the whole breakdown on the website, 2 parts, super detailed. But I saw a couple consistent themes. One I'm going to ask you about in a second. But the first, holding. You seem to have a lot of opinions on holding and what is considered holding and what fans might consider holding. It seems to be a personal crucible of yours as you want to get out there. So explain to me what you're seeing misinterpreted about the holding rule.
Yeah, so a lot of times when you see a defender kind of rip through a gap and, think of like the arm under or the swim move, those kinds of moves in particular allow a defender to get to a half man, right? And a lot of times you'll see an offensive lineman have their arm up and on the back of a defender, and that's oftentimes when Twitter and other social media platforms, things like that, go a little crazy, hoping for holding calls, but that's actually perfectly legal. As long as you're engaged when that defender rips, the defender is making the decision to put himself in that position. And you can do what's called ride. You can actually continue to push and ride that person out. Your hands can get up above like what is typically considered, in phase of blocking with an individual, as well as you can maybe hook just a little bit as a person's coming through and they get that arm under there and drive and do those things. So a lot of times, the Notre Dame fans on my feed were really talking about the officials the other direction, right? And saying they were biased towards Miami because they weren't calling holding on those calls and things along those lines. And I really wanted to make sure that I, while I had a platform, got my voice out there on what is and is not holding, and hopefully quiet the chatter some as we see those games, because it goes the other direction too, right? Whenever we see our players do some of those same moves and maybe an individual kind of hook them around the waist or ride them out of a play, that's allowed on the other side also.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like Big Markel Bell was getting a lot of those calls on Twitter or whatever, people complaining about him, but it makes sense given what you're saying, that 6'8", 6'9", you're trying to rip and get under him, and if anyone's going to be riding people, it's going to be him with his length. Yep. You also talked about, before we get off the penalties, because I want to get into the football part of it, you were very detailed and clear with screenshots. I mean, it's hard to argue with what you were presenting. It was right there. Some of the no calls against Miami, as far as face mask and unsportsmanlike things that, look, if you're going to let them all slide, that's fine. But obviously we got hit with a pretty bad one ourselves, and you highlight a lot of those in your breakdown.
Yeah, I think in this particular one, maybe it irked me just a little bit more because of the opponent, right? Where the whole narrative is around Notre Dame's the white hat and Miami's the black hat in these matchups, right? And I wanted to kind of highlight the fact that in this particular case, it was actually quite the opposite, right? Where Notre Dame was really getting away with several things. The defensive pass interference and some of those things, those really are judgment calls, right? You can maybe call it here and not call it there, a lot of those things. But to me, two-hand grasping somebody's face mask and dragging them on their knees, that's not really a judgment call, right? That's pretty blatant. And then we had another time later on where one of the cornerbacks literally got up under the face mask of a wide receiver and grabbed and turned that. That seems pretty straightforward to me as well. And then on the very first third down of the game, right, where Xavier Lucas was right there to tackle Faison and get him off the field, the blocker literally turned his head and threw him completely off. And that's the only reason why that play worked. And I think that kind of set the tone for the fact that not a single one of those were called in the entire game. And the only team that got a personal foul penalty was actually Miami. And it was on David Blay on a punt return where he's running down the field and the coverage guy goes in front of him, right? And he puts his arm out just to kind of avoid as someone's coming across his legs, and he goes down, and they throw a personal foul on that, right? And it kind of irked me in the fact that none of those were called. And honestly, I don't see how you could push back on the fact that it was one-sided, but just based on the fact that, you saw all the screenshots on the review.
Lance, one of the first things that you mentioned in your Upon Further review, which again, available on CanesInsight.com, always do a tremendous job with those. Mo Toure in coverage. Everyone's talking about the play late in the game. You highlighted another play there early. The stuff that you saw there, correctable from his point of view. I mean, we saw what he was doing in terms of the tackling department, but is that something that you're concerned with moving forward?
Yeah, so even before, whenever he signed, right, that was one of the areas that you just kind of noticed with him, that he's a lot better going forward than he is going backwards, right? And that's typical of a player of that archetype, right, where he's a little bit better of a pass rusher. He's what I might describe as a thumper, an individual that's a little bit bigger and really likes to hit a little bit more than maybe an individual who's going to be a coverage player. There are a couple of things that I saw. One thing I want to talk about, and I highlighted in the review as well. During the live view, I thought Toure was responsible for the bust on the safety, right? The drive where Notre Dame kind of tied the game up late, and it looked like maybe he was the one that busted on that tight end. But really, that was on Jacoby Thomas based on the review. Toure was in man under zone, and he basically is carrying individuals through his zone, getting to a spot drop, right? So he's going to carry that seam route 10 to 12 yards, depending on what the coverage is. And then he's going to release that to that deep safety who's going to follow him up the hash. And in this particular case, Thomas didn't do that. Teray did his job, right? And so while I was mad during the game, when you do these reviews, you kind of maybe things change your opinion a little bit. So on that particular one, that was him. Another one, really, it's just about, having a little more confidence. I feel like he had an individual coming into his area and he was late to see it and get there. That happens, right?
So, Lance, so one of the things that you were critical of on the rewatch, obviously you're not out there bashing people, but you were just explaining what you're seeing on the film, was my guy Elijah Lofton and also Alex Bauman, the tight ends, blocking a little bit. Now I've talked about how Lofton, sensational spring, was banged up in camp, really not where he was before at this point, but he's working his way up. I think I talked to a bunch of people down there today. I think they're really going to make a conscious effort to speed up his process and get him back to where he was and where they expect him to be. But you saw in the game on the rewatch, really both tight ends had a tough time with some of their wham blocks, their inline blocks, and that hurt our offense at times in the running game.
Yeah, I think I even sent you a text before I posted the review because I know, that's your guy a little bit, and maybe I wasn't the most kind on this. I think the one thing I want to say, of course, is none of this is personal, right? This is just what happened in that particular game. These things are fixable. Players are going to have great games. They're going to have less great games, right? In this particular game, Lofton really did struggle with all of the edge blocking that he was asked to do. So Miami in this particular game really employed a sniffer, which is just basically an offset blocker off of the hip of a tackle, right? And it's actually named for sniffer, just like you would think it would be, off someone's rear end. And then they slice across the line of scrimmage. Is basically just think of the guy as like going into motion after the snap, right? To be able to kick out or wham or just wedge block an individual edge. And in this particular game, Lofton had trouble with that. I don't know if there's a technique issue. There are definitely some technique issues in this game, or if it is the injury that you're talking about there. But this was not his best game in that regard. I also want to point out that, Notre Dame's guys are on scholarship too, and number 27 was an impressive player to me. I liked him a lot. He was an individual that was a linebacker for them, made plays as a linebacker. He split doubles. He got off blocks, and he also was real physical with Lofton. So, in that regard, you may not see an individual who's quite that talented in every game moving forward, but Lofton struggled in this one blocking. I thought Bauman was better, but not good, right? I feel like he also missed some blocks. And listen, on the last third down of the game, that was set up to be out the gate, right? That was set up to be, if not a touchdown, definitely down the line, down the sideline to get, 10-yard line or better and salt that game away. But Lofton and Bauman both, they had a combo block on the edge. In this particular case, it was 27 again. And we had Matthew McCoy, number 78, who was pulling around, and he was going to kick out that edge. Or force player. In this particular case, it was a safety who was dropping down. And if they get that block on the edge, it's a first down for certain. It was a 3rd and 4, right? It was a first down for certain if they just hold that block, and it's possibly a touchdown out the gate. So those are things that I'm confident the coaches are talking with those two players about and dreaming up better ways to, do better in the future, because we actually attacked the edges in our run game more in this particular game than we did last year. Last year, you even saw the graphic during the game that we were second in the country, right, on inside runs, a percentage that was well into the 80s. In this particular game, we attacked the edges, outside runs just a little bit more with Brown, but we had some busts on the outside. I can't hear you, so I'm not sure if it's me, but.
Yeah, sorry. So with the inline blocks, I think Lofton is always going to have some struggles with that just because of his length. The collision blocks last year, I thought he was way better than he was in this game. So that's why I think maybe the injury and some other stuff just kind of not clicking for him, because he's got to do better. This is supposed to be really a strength of his, is those on the move kind of collision blocks. He's very explosive, powerful. You saw that last year. It did not happen this year. I think some of it was, like you said, 27 was a stud. I think Notre Dame's linebackers in general, probably the best linebackers will play. I know Pitt has pretty acclaimed fast linebackers, but guys like, I mean, talk about the size and the speed and being well coached and being tough. This was a tough group. But Lance, on the rewatch, and you talked about some of the stuff already, so let's say something besides what we talked about already. Did something surprise you? You always learn when you watch film. Something surprise you positively or negatively that you're like, oh, this is different than I thought, or this is more of what it looked on tape, or sorry, in person watching it. Like when you watched the replay, what jumped out as something you didn't think about on the initial watch from your couch?
Yeah, there were a ton of positives as well in this game, right? We've talked about a few maybe not so positive so far, but I think the depth in the secondary really positively surprised me. Ethan O'Connor played quite a bit more than I would have expected. Damari Brown really showed well. When you bring in 6 or 7 or however many transfer portal DBs that we brought in, you lose sight a little bit of maybe some of the guys who were there. But keep in mind, Damari Brown was, to me, a 5-star talent coming out of high school. I strongly really liked his tape when we got him. I actually liked him more than, the 5-star cornerback that we had committed that went to Colorado. Forget his name right now. But, I actually preferred Damari Brown's tape to him. So I've been hoping that the light will come on just a little bit there. And he was great in this game. He was physical. He was aware. He really was in phase, both in coverage and attacked moving forward. A lot better than I would have expected for him. Tony, I didn't have a lot of tape for him as a 17-year-old who reclassified. I was really encouraged with his route running as well as his strong hands. A lot of times some of these young players are so focused on the route that sometimes they forget about attacking the football. But the play that Tony made on that first touchdown, that is high level stuff where you flatten a route rather than drifting. I see so many wide receivers who continue drifting up the field and hoping for the ball to get to them instead of attacking the ball. To me, that is a wonderful trait for a wide receiver to have. I felt like he was further along than I would have expected in a first game, that atmosphere, that opponent. Tony was awesome. I really was encouraged with the depth on the offensive line. To me, Samson Okunlola even outplayed Matthew McCoy. Not that McCoy was bad. Keep in mind, if I say someone's good, that doesn't mean the other guy's bad. But I thought Samson outplayed McCoy. And to have that kind of competition is something that maybe I didn't anticipate there on the offensive line. That was great. Carson Beck was good. You really wanted to see him coming back from his injury. What did his arm look like? It was strong. I felt like it was probably a B game from Beck, to be quite honest with you. And we didn't even see his A game there. That was something that was good. David Blay, his physicality really popped on tape. You saw some plays where he wasn't responsible in the stat sheet, but he was responsible for the play being made by others just from the way that he was able to push the pocket. A lot of times Notre Dame was doing either guard tackle counters or guard H, think of like an offset tight end counters, and they were pulling individuals. And one of the keys to blow that play up is to have your nose tackle push that center into the backfield so that those pullers kind of have to bubble around them. And he did that more than once, and that'll blow that play up. That's something, if you think back to when North Carolina ran for 500 yards against Miami or whatever, that was their staple play, and we didn't have a guy in the middle that was able to push that center back. And in this particular game, David Blay really did. So that stood out to me. And then I really liked the physicality of Jacoby Thomas and Teray. I felt like having some of those punishers on the defensive side of the ball is something we didn't have last year. And players, offenses were able to get pretty comfortable with them. And then Keontae Scott really stood out. He's one of those individuals that I was excited for. I made a post maybe a month ago back about the fit that he had and how I felt like he was an underrated ad. So, of course, I had a vested interest in him playing well, and I thought he did in this particular game. Not perfect, but I thought he played well. So those were definitely some positives that more than offset some of the negatives that we've already talked about.
Lance, I think a big narrative after the game was the play calling, people kind of categorizing it at the end there as conservative. On rewatch, what were your thoughts on how the game was called offensively there, pretty much down the stretch for Miami? Obviously, there was a couple missed opportunities. Everyone keeps talking about, if Marty Brown doesn't slip, maybe things look different. Keelan Marion on the pass interference that he drew there, that wasn't necessarily a conservative play call. But as a whole, when you watch that back, what were your thoughts?
it's tough for me to criticize, right? I mean, Miami never trailed in this game, so keep that in mind, right? And you get into a stretch where things were really going against you, right? I felt like from maybe the 7-minute mark of the third quarter to maybe the 10-minute mark of the fourth quarter, they really had some adversity and some things go against them in that stretch, right? Where, I felt like some questionable calls happened, as well as, some things that allowed Notre Dame to get back into the game. And oftentimes coaches, they revert to what they're comfortable with, right? Mario, whether you like it or don't like it, that's going to be a comfort zone of his, right? To play power football. I've also kind of brought up the fact that if we make some of those blocks on the edge, right, the play call is going to look a lot better, right? Because it's going to be either a long run or we're going to, continue to move the chains. I've already highlighted a 3rd and 4 play late in the game. Really, I think on the field goal drive, right, where that would have been out the gate. The same drive you already highlighted it as well. We took a deep shot to Marion. That's a touchdown if the Notre Dame guy doesn't tackle him. In college, that's a smart play because it's only 15 yards, right? It's not a spot foul like the NFL. But that's a touchdown if he doesn't do that. So you're attacking a little bit there. Now, my nature is a little more aggressive than what we showed in the fourth quarter as far as having the lead. But Notre Dame has great secondary. I feel like there were a couple of plays where it was like, that could have been a pick, or that could have gone the other direction. And that probably prompted the coaches to go into a shell a little bit. And so I think the long-winded way of saying that there's probably a little bit of, truth to the fact that they went conservative. But I also can't blame them based on the game flow and the way things were heading out because, they never trailed in the game.
Lance, so one of the cool things about this game being on Sunday is you got to watch everybody on Saturday. Some teams weren't really tested. Oregon, Georgia, they're going to be in the mix. But you got to see a pretty good cross-section of the top teams in the country, including the 2 teams that played on Sunday. So, my personal big takeaway, and I'm as homer as it gets, is this is the first time in a while that we actually, in my opinion, have a chance to win a national championship. Doesn't mean we're going to. These are the favorite. Obviously, we know a million things need to happen, especially with this 12-team playoff. We haven't even been to the playoff, haven't even won the ACC. But just seeing experienced quarterback, offensive line, physical running game that's hard to match up with, defensive line doing what they did against Notre Dame's offensive line, the secondary. It just seems like a lot of the pieces that traditionally will allow you to compete for championships and as well as just overall body types. I thought we stacked up pretty well with the other top teams. And just in general, I think parity, you don't see those great Alabama, Georgia teams of a few years ago where it's just hard to match up with for anybody. I know I'm a homer. You watch some of those games. Are you seeing a team that, I'm not saying is the favorite, I'm not saying any of these things. Are you seeing a team that has the chance, because of what they have from a veteran standpoint and a body type standpoint, to compete for a championship?
Yeah, at this point, and I watched a lot of football. We do a guys' weekend over Labor Day, and I was able to kind of sit and watch a lot of the games. It would be an upset if Miami's not in the playoffs. They are absolutely one of the 6-7 best teams that I saw around the country. Now, they were at home. That helps, and that atmosphere was wonderful. I think probably the big caveat for Miami being able to compete for national titles is they are going to be probably thinner up front than some other teams, especially on the defensive line, especially at defensive tackle. Imagine a David Blay injury that's a season ender, right? That can probably change your outlook quite a bit for this team just because we've got true freshmen, behind them on the depth chart. But in watching the teams, right, I watched the Texas-Ohio State game. I watched pretty much the Penn State game and just to kind of see what they looked like. And those teams are strong, but there was nothing that happened that made me think that Miami doesn't have the ability to compete for a national title this year because of some of the things that you talked about, right? To me, you've got to have a quarterback. There's no winning a national championship anymore without a quarterback in my mind. You've got to have an offensive line. You've got to have a defensive line that can stop the run without, having to put 8 in the box, right? To me, that is absolutely a precursor nowadays. And then you've got to have an ability on the outside to play man coverage, because we see so much in college now, these teams, playing just a shell, too deep, hoping that the offense makes a mistake. And that'll work against most opponents, right? But you get into those playoff games and those teams are going to make fewer mistakes. So you've got to be able to play man coverage. Last year, Miami could not. Last year, I never believed Miami was a national title contender. You and I talk a lot. You can vouch for that fact. You talked about you being the biggest homer, and maybe I'm the opposite of that, just from some of my time following this team and being a little disappointed. I kind of have to see it. This is the first time I'm drinking the Kool-Aid in many, many years for this particular team. I also love the fact that we've got a power run game. In the pros, I'm not as big on the run game, but in college, that is still a factor, right? You still do have a physical advantage over your opponents in the college world, and having that physical run game is another thing that maybe I believe in more this year than what we've had in past years.
Yeah, I want to expand on that point because we talked about it offline, but you're a big pro guy. We're both Dolphins fans, and the pro we know is a very much a quarterback-centered game. Now, you do have the Philadelphia Eagles who do such a good job on the offensive line and defensive line, and with running back now with Saquon Barkley, that maybe they're almost like a college team in the physical advantage they have over opponents. But in general, a lot of physical parity at the pro level, and quarterback is usually the difference maker. In college, what are some of the differences that you see in just roster construction? And because again, we talk about these things offline, so I want to bring some of it to this podcast. Like some of the differences you see in putting together the ideal college roster versus putting together the ideal pro roster, and some of the trade-offs, like, hey, this is just worth more, this might be worth less at different levels.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing, right, is the offensive line. You have the ability in the college game to basically take your odds, your probabilities of a loss to almost zero in many of these games just by having that absolute domination on the offensive line, right? If you can just hand the ball off and get 7 yards a carry, 6 yards a carry in these games, and there's absolutely nothing the defense can do about it, that can happen at the college game. That does not happen at the pro game. I think, any NFL fans will tell you that just isn't the way it works at that level. So having that offensive line advantage in the college game sets a floor that, the Miami program hasn't had in a couple of decades, right? So that's something that you can definitely do at the college level that maybe you can't at some of the others. Then you've got defensive tackle. A defensive tackle in the college game, to me, is so valuable if you can get one of those absolute elite, defensive tackles that can wreck a game. Georgia and Alabama are the two programs that I consistently point to for that, where they've got 330-pound guys coming out their ears, or at least in the past they did, and the portals kind of helped to smooth that out a little bit. And we're starting to see Miami trying to get into that game. So those two areas are things that at the college game, you can just automatically have such an advantage over your opponent. And then in the running backs at the college level, you do have a wider distribution than what you have. Each time you go down a level, the running back impact and value rises exponentially. Like in high school, your best player is generally going to be your quarterback who runs, or a running back, right? Because you can have such an advantage there. At the college game, it's not quite to that level, but you can have a running back who is just better than everybody else, and that sets a floor for you as well. And then, of course, quarterback always helps.
I know you wanted to get into some baseball stuff with Lance. You want to do that now, or anything else?
Okay, well, so Lance, I'm gonna take you a little curveball because I want to talk baseball with you while I have you. I know I didn't put that on the prep sheet, but I've been dying to talk baseball. I occurred to me when you're on. I'm like, hey, I know you've been you did a breakdown on the CanesInSight baseball board, the Ron Frazier Memorial board, about some of the transfers and basically our lineup. So I want to talk about baseball with you real quick. But first, before we get to that, just final thoughts. We got Bethune this week. Obviously, it's one of those games. But you follow recruiting pretty close, I know. Any players that you're looking forward to seeing in that live action, just to see what they've got in a Bethune game?
Yeah, I mean, I want to see Hayden Lowe, right? I've heard so much good things from around the program and from both of you as well about him. I want to see him just a little bit more Got a chance to see Armando Blunt. I thought he was good in this game, but maybe he gets a chance to get a little more playing time. That would be fun. I want to see Bryce Fitzgerald a little bit more as well. Another player that I've heard quite a bit about. Basically you want to see what some of these young players have, right? You don't get a chance to see the Sunday night scrimmage for the players that are redshirting and didn't play in the games as much, right? And that would be a lot of fun. And if they'd broadcast that, I'd watch. But some of those would be fun. And basically, you want to see Samson a little bit more, maybe in this game as well. Some of the young guys, yeah. So.
All right, so we're talking some baseball. Pete, let's get a quick word in from some of the best friends that Canes Baseball has.
Our friends at Sala, Astorita, and Cox, salalaw.com. Welcome to Sala, Astorita, and Cox, LLC, a boutique law firm focusing on securities, regulatory matters, broker-dealer, and investment advisor regulation, white-collar criminal defense, complex commercial litigations, and securities arbitration and litigation. The firm aggressively represents clients throughout the nation. Contact them now at 561-989-9080 or visit them online at salalaw.com.
So, Lance, people have been begging to talk baseball. I'm dying to talk baseball. I know you follow the team very close, and you had a lot of things to say on the board about the transfers and just the way our lineup's shaking out, some of the pitching staff, how it's shaking out. You had great thoughts last year. For those who don't remember, I remember Will Smith, who everybody saw in the postseason, do his thing. I remember you had a breakdown that nailed him to the T. Had to keep the ball in the park, but was going to get a lot of swing and miss. Analytics were better than the raw ERA. I mean, you nailed that one in particular. You talked a lot about just the expanded bullpen and having more veteran arms there and how that would really, really help the staff. That certainly turned out to be true. Carson Fisher, Reese Lumpkin, guys that were not sexy on paper, turned out to be very valuable. And I remember you breaking that down in particular and a bunch of other stuff. So as the dust has settled now, we've had the draft. The freshmen are in. The portal class is done. We have the Miami baseball team. They're already working out. I've heard they look really, really good physically, just a night and day from 2 years ago, especially when you add the freshmen, which is a pretty physical freshman class. I heard just filling out the uniform, much better team than 2 years ago, and obviously expected to be a better team on the field. What did you see from this portal class? And now the dust has settled, what this roster is looking like for the Miami Hurricanes baseball team?
Yeah, they just continue to lengthen, the pitching staff is one thing that you're continuing to see, right? In my experience, breaking down analytics and things that translate and correlate into the next season, one of the biggest things is their K percentage minus their walk percentage, right? You can really tell that Miami has focused on that quite a bit with some of these transfer arms that they have. I think you've also got a couple of, maybe reliever to starter conversions. You've got a couple of arms who can really help lengthen some of that staff, right? You mentioned 2 years ago a couple times in your run up to this conversation, right? And we were frankly starting guys on the weekdays that a Miami program probably shouldn't be, right? And you could just see the ability to raise the floor by just deepening that midweek staff. And we saw that come to fruition last year. And I think this year you see it another step, right? Where you've got just a level of stuff from those 8th, 9th, 10th arms on your staff that you haven't had in years. You brought in one of my favorites, Frank Menendez. I know he's going to be out probably until, the April area. So he might be more of a 2027 type helper, but he's someone to get excited about. I really liked the two transfers that signed. Their numbers were great. Marks and I want to say Macchiola, but probably pronounced that wrong. But those two that signed, that was a hurt, I felt like. But then after they did, you have to give the staff credit. They went and identified a couple of additional arms that they were able to use, some of those spots on. That when you watched their film, you looked into their numbers, they really have an ability to be something, if not straight out of the gate this year, a couple of years down the line. And then you really hit on the physicality as well, right? Another study that I've done into teams that outperform their expectations, make it to Omaha. You'd be surprised at the size of those teams, right? Where they just absolutely average, the 6'2", 210, 6'3", 220 types. And maybe the 5'9", 185 overachiever type teams They have a high floor during the regular season, but don't see quite as much of that postseason success. It's probably because as the arms ratchet up, you also just have to have a certain level of physical talent to be able to compete at those levels. And those are things that I've seen Miami moving in the right direction. Last year, going into the season, I was absolutely taken aback at the lack of pro talent projection from a Miami program. And you've seen since Arteaga has taken over, he's really focused on trying to, increase the body types, increase the athletic profile, increase the pro projections that you're seeing within the program. And I've liked that. I was big on the strength and conditioning individual that they brought in. You did see some of those gains last year. And this year, I'm hoping that we see a little bit more of some of those velocity gains from individuals as well. So.
I know early on that there was a lot of talk about the pitching really the last 2 years, because maybe it's because Kafis and Yo-Yo, those teams hit so well and the pitching kind of let the team down at times. The people have been hyper-focused on the pitching. But really, I know you've talked about this looking at the numbers, our offense is what's really trailed behind really both years relative to what the Miami should be doing at the ACC level. This lineup, when you add a Sosa at catcher, when you add some of those big guys, Copeland, West, Van Shahan at second base, could also play shortstop, bring back Ogden, you bring back your two outfielders that hit really, really well down the stretch in Galvin and Williams. What do you see from this offense, and can it be one of the top offense, not just an improved offense, but one of the top offenses in the conference and potentially in the country?
Yeah, I think there's absolutely the ability for that, right? You nailed it on the fact that you were able to bring back some of your key pieces. You've got an anchor in Cuvée who, has already established himself as a first-round type of player, which I believe every great team needs to have some sort of anchor in their lineup that you can point to that, this guy can hit pitching that you're going to see at those levels. I worry a little bit that, maybe it's more of a 6-man lineup at the moment than an 8-man lineup. I always want to have 8 guys that I believe can, be at least 100 wins created plus type players, which is considered, an average hitter. Want to be able to have those guys. I think the big thing that they've done is they've raised the floor on their on-base percentage. I see a lot of baseball people talk about batting average, which is a nice thing, but to me, my goal is to not make outs, right? And what measures that, of course, is your on-base percentage. I also believe we need more slugging, right? The college baseball world has really moved towards slug over everything else, right? And Miami, in my opinion, needed more slug. I do believe that this lineup that they've added the physicality, they've added some more slug at certain spots. First base in particular, lagged very far behind what the top college baseball teams do. DH, another area where, you really just got to have a 120 wins created plus type hitter at your DH, or you're going to be lagging behind the top programs. I feel like Miami has done a great job of installing hitters into those areas that are going to raise your floor. Whether they're going to be an elite offense, I probably wouldn't project them there at this moment, but I would certainly project them to be upper half of the ACC, where last year maybe they were more middle of the pack.
I'm getting jealous, Lance. I'm going to need you to get into the basketball analytics space, man. We're going to have to create a LanceRoff.com to compete with KenPom.
Well, I got to ask you, though, Lance. So, one thing I thought about at the top that you did a really good job of, now having seen how the season played out, was really hitting on these relievers and these midweek guys, and identifying their strengths and weaknesses really before a lot of people. So it was an interesting mix, I thought, of some of the arms that were brought in, where you had a guy like, a Lyndon Glidewell from Austin P. You had the Ryan Belika from Richmond Spiders, guys that were very productive, maybe lighter on the stuff, although I think Bilka has some pretty good stuff, but guys that had been college performers. Then you also had guys that were not really college performers, but they were at the Cape and they were striking people out left and right. I think of Patrick Bradley Cooney, righty, who was at Alabama, and really a strikeout monster, at least when he's able to throw strikes, has had issues with command. TJ Coates, who I think Salta Lamaki, who Miami just hired, who was his coach at the Cape, I think he was kind of like an inside job there coming to Miami, but TJ Coates, right-hander, a lot of strikeouts at the Cape, Nebraska kid, wasn't that productive at Nebraska. So when you're putting together a bullpen or just a deepening your pitching staff in the portal, do you favor guys that are more college performers that might not be huge on stuff and jumping up a level, or guys that are like getting a lot of whiffs, a lot of swing and miss, but they need to hone into the command? Or is it a mix? Like, how do you put this whole puzzle together?
Yeah, you're at the end there. You kind of nailed it, right? You're looking for all of those things, right? You want to have individuals that have competed in the past and performed. You want to give those guys a chance, right? They've got to have a baseline of talent, right? You can't have guys throwing 75, that even if they performed, those guys are probably not going to work out. But I also really strongly believe in different arm angles, right? I love to be able to give players, teams different looks, right? You're starting to see a lot of these SEC teams, with different arm angles out of the bullpen, right? You're only going to use that guy maybe for one inning or maybe even for just a couple of batters. But that's something that I strongly believe in. I want to have different looks out of my bullpen. I always want to have left-handers, but you've also got to have movement profiles. So like their pitches, you want to be able to like have different stuff that can attack different types of teams, right? So a right-handed, heavy offense, you want to be able to have pitchers who have sweepers, who have pitches that move away from them, right? You want to have individuals that have fastball command to certain areas of the zone, right, where you can attack an offense late. You really want to know what strengths and weaknesses of the teams are, so you can attack them with that. But you hit on it perfectly, right? I want to have a bunch of those Carson Fisher types. So I've got a floor, right, where I'm not going to be losing to the Florida Internationals of the world every midweek game, right, because I just don't have the arms to get through, 5 games in a week, right? So I need all of those college performers to really fill out my depth innings, right? But then I want to have particular 3-4 guys in my bullpen that I know are going to really produce in my leverage. Ryan Billica, just like you talked about, I mean, he's a double transfer and he's performed everywhere he's gone, but he also was a U.S. national, trials team, mid-90s guy. I mean, that's a guy that I would probably even look at trying to convert to a starting role with as many innings as he was able to throw, holding his stuff to 90-plus pitches, things along those lines. And then, you always want to take the flyers, right? You want to take 95. If a guy throws 95 with juice and he's got ride and carry like a TJ Coates, and he's got a frame, that allows him to be able to hold that stuff deep into games, why would you not take a flyer on a guy like that, that you've been able to see perform at a Cape level? And that, for me, I'm a data dork, right? So I want to look at what their pitch profiles look like on the TrackMan, and those are going to be where I can identify pitchers who can help me. And then Eileen ground ball profile, right? I love, if you can get me strikeouts and ground balls, I'm all in on you, those types. And that was really where I was able to kind of identify some of those pitchers that you mentioned. I appreciate the kind words on that. But a lot of it really is just looking at those particular profiles and then seeing, how does their stuff work whenever they've been able to get into the games.
Yet the name I immediately thought of when you were talking about sort of finding a balance was Alex Giroux, in terms of a guy that did perform in college, but the stuff just maybe wasn't at the bare minimum of what you needed for ACC and had some ups and downs, right? So there's there's that line that you got to figure out, right? Where can you take a performer and maybe lack some ability, but not get below the line of what's going to play in the ACC? The weekend staff, Siskar, I think we could kind of put him in there with Penn at one of these days. Tate Darius, I heard he was up to 97 in his workouts. I know, obviously, we've seen that in the offseason. You got to see how it plays out, but a very talented guy, probably looking more for that out pitch. We saw him struggle a little bit in 2 strike counts to put guys away. Hopefully that develops. But let's just put him in to one of these spots just because he had done it last year. Who do you like as that third guy? And again, I'm assuming a couple guys start that may not end up starting on the weekend, but we're just assuming those 2 are in. Who would be that third guy, whether it's a Rob Evans, a coach, someone else, that you're like, man, this guy, I could – based on his profile, based on what he might have done in the summer or whatever, I could see this guy sliding in as that Sunday guy or pushing up for an even higher spot.
Yeah, I don't think I'm ready to go with a Coates. I think he's going to have to really kind of earn that in a fall camp. I mentioned him already. I'd probably go with like a Bilica, a Ryan Bilica type, and try and convert him into a starting role. I think his stuff and his compete and his results at this point is just an individual that I would use there. And if he's not a starter, then he's my come in the fourth inning and maybe finish out the game type in some of those Florida games, Florida State type games where he can get you to the finish line. Rob Evans, he really performed in the summer. I felt like his strike percentage is going to be the focus for him, right? I've kind of put together even an algorithm that converts their strike percentage into their walk percentage, and what you can forecast with them. I really need a guy to be, upper 60s, maybe even, pushing 70 on strike percentage. And last year he was more of a low 60s type out of the bullpen. Those are going to be higher leverage spots, though. So, you typically would throw maybe a little more careful pitches out of the bullpen. So we'll see how he kind of competes. And then we've got some freshmen who might have a chance. I don't really have anybody at this point that's kind of earmarked for that spot other than, I'd like to see Bilica get a chance to compete with Evans. Some of the new guys I really think probably are going to be more of a midweek to start the year and kind of go from there.
So, Lance, before I let you go, you probably talk more baseball than you expected, but when the light hit me, I needed to get into this because we had you, right? And I've been dying to talk about this. We've been getting a lot of requests for baseball talk. So just big picture, first year, there was a talent deficit and then probably some underachieving. Things could have gone better, but I mean, it was kind of like Mario's first year. It was bad on both sides. Last year, talent elevated, but I think overachieved, probably based on, I know your numbers guy, maybe some of it was luck. Some of it, I think the chemistry stuff did actually have a factor during some of those losing streaks to really get through, but it overachieved. Now this year, you're hoping that the actual talent level and expectation and power ranking, however you want to slice it, has elevated to where this is a team that can be expected to perform and then does perform. Is this a team that on paper, with the questions in the staff and everything else, compete to win the ACC?
So the short answer is no. No, they're not quite to that level yet. They probably are more hoping to host type level. Winning the ACC, we are so focused on football in our sports world, right? And we think of the SEC as like the end all be all in the football world. But in baseball, ACC is right there when it comes to talent level, when it comes to competition. They're right there as a 1B with SEC in baseball. I don't think they're quite to that level yet this year. Again, losing a couple of those transfers to the draft really hurt, because I think both of those guys would have been in the rotation, quite frankly. But you're definitely a contender to host, right? And if you host a regional, now you got a chance at your goal, right? Last year, let's say you were on this podcast, would you have been saying, well, Coastal Carolina, has a chance to, be one of the best teams in the country or play for a national title? And they were absolutely legit. I build my own WAR models because D1s is off. Their run environment hasn't been updated. And so I can't rely on that for pitching. And Coastal Carolina had the third, fourth, and sixth best starting pitchers in the country last year with with a strength of schedule adjusted, right? So that is something you see every year. You see teams that maybe you wouldn't say, is a number one or number two type team in the country get a chance to, prove themselves in those tournaments. Miami was, what were they? A couple of outs away from Omaha last year. And I think this roster is better than last year's. You expect development from your sophomores to juniors, right? Your freshmen to sophomore players, you expect them to improve. So a guy returning, you expect him to be better next year than he was this year, right? Just in general. So to me, Miami has a chance to be a top 15, 16 type team. And from there, you have a chance to go to Omaha.
Last year, you look at Texas A&M, right? Preseason number 1, they don't make it. I think Virginia was preseason number 2, if I recall. So really a lot of disappointment at the top. Texas, best team coming into the tournament. Obviously, that didn't play out. So, I think you're right. It's just more about how you're playing at the end of the year, hosting if possible. Hosting a super regional would be outstanding. But yeah, I think you hit it. So Lance, appreciate you. Everybody check out Hurricane Vision on Twitter, Lance Roffers on CanesInSight.com. Upon further review, you got to check that one out every time it comes out. Unbelievable. And Lance, man, appreciate you. The most requested. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, real quick, Pete, looking great, man. You're hitting the gym, it looks like, over there. So I see a lot of the comments come through, and I thought that myself there. So got to call out, give a shout out to my guy Pete. Does he have any eligibility left?
Listen, I saw the comments. I appreciate them. I think it's the Tri-Blend shirt is helping me out today. And second of all, I might have a year left, but I don't know if I'm passing that physical, man. Three torn ACLs in the same knee. I don't know, man. I can still jiggy a little bit, but I don't know, Lance. I appreciate it though.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Roffers, the man, and a little bonus segment brought to you by Sala Astorita and Cox. So awesome, man. That was great. That was awesome. Pete, I want to talk recruiting, right? Because I know we're getting a lot of requests to talk about recruiting. Tomorrow we're going to be on all day, but we'll be talking, I'm sure, a lot of football. So you have recruiting thoughts. I got a episode of The Bank that's coming up. We can just do it all together. So we'll get into some recruiting here. First, before we get into recruiting, right, want to talk about our friends at Cash Kick. That is K-A-S-H. So cash with a K, and then kick just like it's spelled. I'll pull it up here, Pete. Cashkick.com. This is one of the biggest apps on the planet. I believe it was top 4 lifestyle app, right above of Pinterest. Over 1.5 million downloads. So this is as legit as it gets. And you look at the website. If you like to play games, you're on a college sports podcast. You're probably used to fiddling around with your phone, fiddling around with your computer, competing, all that kind of stuff. You might play games on your phone. You're waiting in the doctor or whatever it is, just kind of waving past the time. Cashkick.com gives you all the best games right there available, easy to play, all organized, updated, brand new games that you can go and sort through and play on the app, Cash Kick app. And then the bonus is you can earn some money on the side by playing. It sounds too good to be true, but I promise you this is a real deal thing. Just look up Cash Kick, look up the app, look how popular it is, for over a 4.5 rating on the App Store. So if you want to have some fun playing games, make it easy to find games, and also make some money on the side, download the Cash Kick app. That is K-A-S-H-K-I-C-K for Cash Kick, and you will not be disappointed. Just a lot of fun and make some money on the side with Cash Kick. Also, before we get into recruiting, I got to talk about my boys at Buzzin'. It's the weekend, so if you're looking to have some fun, don't want to be hungover, want to catch that buzz without that pain the next day, Buzzin'. drinkbuzzin.com. That is drink, BUZZN.com. Go to Big Daddy's Liquors all over South Florida, probably the most popular liquor store down here. They got trucks of Buzzin', BUZZN. Just go into Big Daddy's Liquors, request it. Or if you're around the country, just go to drinkbuzzin.com, BUZZN. 7.5 milligrams real THC infused seltzer. Choose your chill. You got watermelon, strawberry, cherry, the variety pack. I got to steal all these taglines. All bubbles, no troubles. The perfect refresher for those who want to unwind right. Bubbles with benefits. I mean, these guys really do a great job with their slogans. All hang, no hangovers. Pretty good one right there, Pete.
I like it.
And right here, bubbles with benefits. You subscribe, you save 20%. You bundle and save, get free shipping over $99. So you can just load up for football season at drinkbuzzin, BUZZN.com. First time order, use FIRST50, promo code FIRST50 for 50% off at Buzzin'. All right, ready to talk recruiting?
Yeah, let's do it. Check the private chat as well, just so you are cognizant of it. But what do you want to get into first?
Let's get into, so just real quick on the game. I know we talked to some people about the game. You talked to some people about the game. One name that we both heard separately highlighted as having a very good game, James Brockermeyer, the center, right? So what are you hearing on James Brockermeyer?
Pretty much what they expected in terms of, blitz pickup communication. They were very happy with how that went during the game. Just overall offensive line-wise, we've seen a lot about Markel Bell. I don't think there's any concern about him. There's, 2 or 3 reps he'd like to have back as most offensive linemen would. The overriding thing I always hear about him, D, is yes, speed is still something that I think we can see by what happened last week and sometimes last year is going to be not an issue, but I think that's something he's going to have to deal with because of how big he is, right? But the other snaps, he's just physically dominating and taking guys out of the game. So, but yeah, a lot of Brockermeyer, from what I understand, was the highest graded guy internally. So we understand this is different than the PFF ratings. PFF doesn't really know or understand what each player's responsibility or job is on the given play. So how can you judge that without knowing it? So Brockermeyer is someone they were really, really pleased with.
Yeah, I heard the same on all accounts. One name, the receivers, the blocking, you've heard about that. Everybody happy with how the receivers blocked, happy with the defensive line, and just overall, I mean, you can imagine, very, very pleased with the performance. We've had a lot of questions about Elijah Lofton and JoJo Trader just because, I was saying, and I think most people that were at practice would agree with what I was saying, which is that in spring, those were your two best offensive players, at least skill position players. That did not materialize really in camp or in the game. I think injuries had a lot to do with both of those guys. But I do think you're going to see a conscious effort to get those guys going as we get here into this stretch of some very tough games. You're going to need both those guys to play at the level they played at in spring. So just talking to some sources, hey, what's going on? Those guys are going to be pushed to really get going and get back in time. They missed so much time with Beck. You got to accelerate that timing process. I think you're going to see that over the next few days. But overall, yeah, the current team feeling very good. I think this weekend they're going to really push to see a lot of these young guys. They want to see who's not just guys that are going to help us this year potentially, but this is the modern era of college football, right? You're going to have to fight to keep guys. The retention battle, Miami did a great job retaining guys this past offseason. You saw other teams get hit, big-time programs, blue-chip programs getting hit hard on the retention side. Georgia lost their best pass rusher to Missouri, just to give you an extreme example. It's hard to retain guys. I can tell you Ruben Bain being probably the biggest example. Teams were throwing insane amounts of money at Ruben Bain, right? Enough money that it was a serious issue to deal with. Ultimately, Canes Connection gets it done. He's winning games for the Miami Hurricanes. He's going to shake Roger Goodell's hand wearing an orange tie. So that's part of this. Another part with the young players, guys that aren't playing is what you want to see. Who are you going to fight to retain, right? Who are the guys that maybe aren't playing, like Malachi Tony, that's an obvious one, but guys that aren't playing as much, you're going to say, hey, this is a huge part of our future. Part of this process is figuring that out. I think by October 16th, by basically like 5 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now, you'll have a much better idea of what this team is, what some of the young players are, and then recruiting-wise. So on the recruiting side of the piano, you got stuff on recruiting as well. We know it's flip season. They're going to try to flip some players. I don't think it's anything that's imminent. I think this is going to be a continuous process, both from the players watching Miami, see how Miami continues to build, and also Miami watching them, seeing who's having great senior seasons and who they want to flip. Hayden Lowe, an example of someone who had a great senior year, and they really put the pressure on late, got that one done. So that's going to be an ongoing process. I don't think it's a situation where, you're going to have a ton of flips in the near future, maybe one, but not a ton of flips in the near future. But I think you're going to see a process. Guys that you're really working to flip, we know Derek Cooper they're trying to flip. I know Gabby put out the report that one was kind of going away. And look, Gabby is as plugged in as anybody, but I did hear that there's still a lot of juice there with Derek Cooper potentially. I would not give that one up. Tank Jones, Peters talked about, that's a big priority guy for the Miami Hurricanes. We interviewed him at the Lickin' on Saturday where we do our pregame shows every home game. That was a very impressive player. They're going to keep trying to flip him. Jet Washington, he's been targeted as a priority guy. I know it's going to be tough to flip him from Oregon, but he's a priority guy. There's communication there. Aiden Pouncey, a name we haven't talked about a lot, big, athletic defensive back. Miami's still working there. And Pete's got some other names that we're still in communication with. But probably the name I think with the most juice right now, Calvin Russell, teammate of Malachi Tony on the 7-on-7 level. You saw him in the locker room after the game with Malachi Tony. Syracuse got blown out. It's still freezing. I see things escalating with the Calvin Russell. We'll see how that one goes. But that would be the name I circle just because of the variety of factors. He was at this game. He's coming back. He's very tight with Malachi Tony. He saw what Malachi Tony did as a true freshman. And then Syracuse just being kind of a bad situation overall. And it's not getting any warmer up there. So to me, that's a name I would highlight as someone I think Miami's going to push for and have a good chance with.
Yeah, 100% agreed on that. I posted on the Discord earlier this week, and then I posted last night also a follow-up to it. But this is not one that Mario wants to lose by any stretch. And there's certain players in each class that I think Mario will take a particular interest in, and he's very involved in the entire recruiting process. But I think this is one that he just, not just the optics, but he really likes this guy as a player. But yet does not want to lose, obviously, a legacy recruit. Mom having played basketball, great player at Miami for the women's hoops program. And then, of course, just not wanting to lose a kid to Syracuse, right? You can kind of stomach it sometimes if it's a Texas with Derek Cooper, even though you're still upset about that one, which I do agree that one's not dead yet. But Brett Kaloje is a name that I still am going to keep on the radar there, D. Still some communication with Miami staff. He's visiting USC this weekend for their game against Georgia Southern. So, again, like you said, I don't think he's one of those that's like anything imminent. They still got to chip away at it. But if he takes that trip to Miami for the Florida game, which isn't too much to ask, I don't think. He's an IMG kid. He was very high on Miami. That should be a pretty hyped up game at that point of the season. If Miami does, if Florida, even if they lose at LSU, it's still going to be a big matchup. So that one is one I would keep on the radar as well.
By the way, we are at Duffy's Tavern. I'm looking at the wall. Happy hour starts at 11 p.m. till last call, 2 for 1 on well drinks and all drafts. So Duffy's Tavern. Make sure when you're looking up Duffy's, because I know you're seeing us here, you're like, man, I want to be a part of this. I want to see what Duffy's is all about. Duffy's Tavern. That's the real Duffy's. It's not the chain. The chain, you'll find that somewhere else. Duffy's Tavern is the real deal. The classic Miami spot where you see Craig Erickson and Steve Walsh on the wall from 1989. You want to go to that spot? The home of the Miami Hurricanes. That's going to be Duffy's Tavern. So just on recruiting, one more thing. Class of 27, Miami's got a lot of things going on there. One name I want to highlight, quarterback. If you want to keep an eye on a quarterback in this class, that tends to move a little earlier. Trent Seaborn out of Thompson, Alabama. That would be the name I keep an eye on. I think he's going to visit Miami very, very soon. He's already visited us in the past unofficially. I believe he might have visited us twice already unofficially, at least once. But he will be visiting us again here in the near future during the season. It could be Florida. It's going to be very soon. I don't know exactly how his schedule is going to fall, but he is going to be visiting Miami very, very soon. That's a quarterback to watch. Trent Seaborn, 4-star quarterback out of Thompson, Alabama. So if you want to start doing your work on the next quarterback for the Miami Hurricanes, check out Trent Seaborn.
All right. Remember to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. I might do a show later too. Who knows? Might have some more info to drop. And if you guys saw, I think things are moving with Miami and Adidas again for that extension. So maybe I go live here later today.
Stay tuned. The content's going to be pumping out. We'll be at the Lickin' tomorrow all day, getting ready for the pregame on location right next to the stadium at Miami Gardens. Again, Duffy's happy hour starts 11 p.m. till last call, 2 for 1 on well drinks and all drafts. Home of CanesInSight. Appreciate everybody joining us on the show. We got, as usual, almost 1,000 on
yes,
Friday
Johnny's
morning.
Asking basketball news. I was at Columbus practice yesterday, and that was a sight to behold. I am still in awe at what I saw out there. There's like 5 future NBA players on that team. I'll talk about that. That's definitely something I want to get into.
Like, subscribe. Go Canes.
Go Canes.